Arknights is going through an interesting period at this time of year. 3 back-to-back limited banners, and my random supply can't keep up. We just finished the second Rainbow Six Siege collab, and this event not only brought me the worst pulling experience on a limited banner ever, but also new rainbow operators to mess around with. While Ella is a very strong sniper with ground unit capabilities, and some may consider broken, I want to highlight the other two operators in the same banner, Doc and Iana. I will go over the talent and skills as well as share my opinion on their roles in future content. Let's begin with our beloved Frenchman. Doc is a Parisian combat medic, a member of the Médecins Sans Frontières organization. In Arknights, he is a 5-star instructor guard with a heavy focus on healing. He has 657 attack and 360 defense, goes up all the way to 400 with thrust bonus, which is really good, and the instructor class has the second fastest attack interval, just behind fighters. Knowing that Doc is a combat medic in Rainbow Six, I thought it would make sense to make him a guardian defender, but Hypergriff seems to choose a more offensive approach to Doc's kit, and thus he is able to benefit from the 120% attack buff that comes with all instructor guards. Doc is also the only instructor who is able to hit aerial targets thanks to his weapon of choice, the LFP-586. Doc is one of the few 5-star operators to have two talents. His first talent, Field Medic, increases his max HP and ignores a flat amount of enemy defense, up to 140 at pot 5 with no module. This talent gives him a slight bit of survivability, and thanks to his defense ignore mechanic, Doc can take on more than just slugs and dogs. He will most likely not be able to kill tougher enemies, especially those with A-rank defenses, but he can at least chip off some HP and let the other operators deliver the killing blow. His second talent, Sympathicus Simulation, is really interesting. Any excess healing from Doc will create a barrier. This is a familiar mechanic that we've seen with Hummus. The barrier decays over time and does not last very long, but it's still long enough to provide some degree of protection. The decay rate is 20% per second at Elite 1 or 10% per second at Elite 2. The barrier is best used when the operator is at full HP to maximize its lifetime. Yes, in some cases you can use it as emergency healing, but as we get to his skills later, this is very limited. In other words, you're gonna have to deploy a medic alongside him in most cases. Doc's first skill, Violent Response, that is very funny name considering he's a doctor, immediately heals himself and reduces his attack interval. The skill has 31 ammo, but this skill can only be used 3 times per deployment. The reduced attack interval provides Doc with enough DPS to take on a swarm of weak enemies. Skill 1 heals Doc up to 400% of his attack, which equals to 2628 heals per skill, which is enough to trigger his second talent. The self-healing does allow Doc to solo lane hold, but from my testing though, he struggles quite a lot against enemies with medium defenses, especially during his skill downtime. So the best workaround I find is to duo lane hold by making Doc a support DPS, accompanying any operator that can do better damage than him. I also need to address the elephant in the room, the limited usage of this skill. Some players might find the 3 usage per deployment very limiting, and thus it requires you to be very strategic with its usage. In most cases though, you won't be using the skill 3 times per deployment unless you are up against some really difficult enemies. Of course, we have seen skills with limited usage before, like Susuru's skill 2, but from what I've seen, they don't seem to pose a major issue. Worst case scenario, you have to redeploy Doc and get penalized by the extra 70-second cooldown. Doc's second skill, Stim Pistol, shoots an epinephrine shot 4 tiles forward, healing an allied unit in front of him. With each proc, this skill can heal to almost 5000 HP, the highest healing amount per skill by any operator. Its usage is also limited to 3 times per deployment, which is fair, and at 5000 heals, Doc almost always guarantees a barrier to the operator he heals, as long as the target operator is not a Crusher guard, who has more than 5000 HP. And if you heal them when they're very low, you're probably not gonna get the barrier. The strength of this skill is its synergy with Ark's skill 2 and 3. The temporary barrier protects your range operator who would normally die from Ark's hard-hitting skill 3 or skill 2. Traditionally, players would use Shining skill 3 by buffing the operator's defense, but Doc offers a much cheaper alternative and his skill cycles a lot faster. He's also a 5-star operator, even though he's limited, and if you roll on Ella's banner, you should get at least one copy of him. For other applications, skill 2 can be used to strengthen your operator against hard-hitting attacks with very long intervals. For example, the Chapter 10 Artillery, or the Steam Knight's heavy attack. Also worth noting that Doc lacks the buffing abilities like other instructors do. Wait, that sounded incorrect. Doc lacks the ability to give buffs to other operators that are otherwise present in other instructor guards. And so with skill 2 equipped, he's more of a support healer for your medics and a slightly weaker guardian defender. For mastery, I suggest prioritizing skill 2. The benefits you get here are a lot better than skill 1, massive healing multiplier, and a reduced SP cost. Skill 1 is more beneficial for Doc's own survivability, but given that his defensive stats are rather low and he's not designed to be a tank, skill 1 should be the least of your concern. Doc also comes with his Gamma module, allowing him to be deployed on ranged tiles. At higher levels, his first talent also improved. He gets more HP and ignores more defenses. The module doesn't add much to his damage performance, but being able to deploy it on range tiles does add to his flexibility and might be useful in some situations. Other than that though, I don't see any more beneficial things from this module, so priority is not that high for this. Moving on from Doc, perhaps the most interesting operator in this banner, Iana. According to the Rainbow Six website, she is an engineer and we get to see one of her tech in action in this collab event. Iana is a 5-star dogkeeper, making great use of her hologram as part of her kit. She has 708 attack, 291 defense, and around 2400 HP with a 1.2 second attack interval, which is slightly slower than Doc. Unlike the rest of the dogkeeper though, Iana does things differently, and that all starts with her talent. Iana's talent, Gemini Replicator, is the backbone of her kit. Some people might find her talent confusing, so let me help clear it up. When you deploy Iana, she does not attack, because what you see is a holographic image of herself. When her hologram self is attacked, she switches into her substitute or doll form, inflicting 20% fragile to the attacker and removes their invisibility, lasting for 8 seconds. The doll form is the real Iana. She lasts for 20 seconds, but she cannot block enemies. The range of her substitute form is in a diamond shape, just slightly larger than other doll keepers. In addition to that, in doll form, Iana can hit aerial targets as well. With that being said, Iana's talent brings a new perspective on this archetype by making the substitute take on a more active role. Not to mention, her invisibility reveal is a great utility that proves its usefulness in the event stages against these shadowy motherfuckers who always fucking stuns my operators. Arrgh! Iana's first skill, Mirage Mine, is a passive skill that deals physical damage to the attacker and enemies around them when switching to the substitute. The skill deals an AoE damage and can hit aerial enemies as well. If the enemy leaves the map before the damage applies, it will be applied on Iana's position instead. The bulk of the damage comes from Iana swapping in to her substitute form, so in order to take full advantage of it, you want to position Iana in a way that she will bait the enemy attack. The great thing about this skill is that Iana's counterattack will reach enemies wherever they are on the stage. There's a mortar dude on the other side of the stage? No problem. Iana will fuck him up. The damage is quite weak, so it's best used against weak to lightly armored enemies. For tougher enemies, the most you can do is apply an 8-second fragile and a small amount of damage. Iana's skill 2, Omniscient Tactics, is a manually activated skill that removes enemy invisibility for 8 seconds, and Iana switches to her substitute. Additionally, Iana increases her attack speed and gives herself invisibility over the skill duration. The duration, however, only lasts for 10 seconds maximum, half the duration of her substitute. Skill 2 also has a hidden trick that's not mentioned in the description. When the skill is charged, and Iana in her normal form takes a hit, she triggers her talent by applying Fragile and procs the skill automatically. The attack speed buff reduces Iana's attack interval to, by my calculation, 0.3 seconds, giving her enough DPS to clear a swarm of light enemies, and in some cases, C-rank defense enemies as well. Skill 2 has one major weakness. If Iana takes a hit before the skill is ready, it will prematurely triggers without the attack speed buff and invisibility applied to herself, and it increases the cooldown by 20 seconds. Therefore, positioning is important so that this does not happen. Both skills require full investments into its mastery to see actual results. My suggestion for mastery priority would be skill 2 M3 followed by skill 1 M3. The former gives an additional 40 attack speed, which helps improve Iana's DPS, and this also increases her skill duration. On top of that, Iana's DPS potential provided by her skill 2 outshines that of skill 1. Iana's module increases her attack by 15% when she's in her substitute form. At higher levels, the module improves the fragile effect from her talent, making it stronger and lasts 2 seconds longer. The attack buff from her module would benefit Iana massively since her substitute does most of the attacking. It is something to consider investing in if you want to use Iana at her full potential. For this part of the video, I want to talk about what the future holds for the aforementioned operators and share some of my closing thoughts. Starting with Doc, and to be frank, the Instructor Guard is a niche archetype. Combine that with his lack of stat buffs, Doc is in a kind of a tough competition with Palace and Guardian Defenders. On the upside though, when you do get around to use him, he's a pretty solid operator. His synergy with Ark is really good, but I don't think we'll see him in a lot of stages. Maybe in IS game modes where operators can be limited. As for Iana, she is a fun operator to use. She sort of flipped the Dollkeeper archetype on its head. She's a great support DPS, and her invisibility reveal is a great addition to her kit. Not to mention that her skill 2 has a really short cycle, making it spammable. Significantly better than Tsukinogi. Iana will be a really great operator in clearing stages with a lot of invisible enemies, which normally are found in the main story, some side story events, and sometimes IS game modes. And that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope that you enjoyed the collab event. Let me know in the comments how did your pulls went, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!